Ask her to stand because we believe in equal seats for equal say.
50-50 Parliament, it's very clear what we want. We want equal seats and equal say. And as we all know in politics, you have to be really clear about what you want. And we don't really want to mention the Trump word, but he was clear. Anyone know his slogan? Yeah, you see, you can all say it and you're not even American. So that's why 50-50 Parliament is for equal seats and equal say. That's what we're about. We started in about 2013, and at that time, this was the picture that they used to have to advertise tours of Parliament. And we snuck in these 50-50 t-shirts, and I was a bit nervous at the time because I'd never done it before. And I just learned how to tweet. And we played Spot the Woman. And then we tweeted it out. They don't have this photo in Parliament advertising their tours anymore, they just have empty benches. Because basically a picture tells 1,000 words. It's clearly not very diverse, and that's why we need a campaign like 50-50 Parliament. We're campaigning on behalf of all women because we want to build a better, more inclusive, more diverse Parliament.
And basically, the numbers show the sexism. 441 of our MPs are men, 209 are women. So in the House of Commons, and commoners are women too, by the way, you know, we're 52% of commoners, but we're outnumbered by 3 to 1. Well, 2 to 1 in the Commons and 3 to 1 in the Lords, and the name says it all. In the last 100 years, we've got the vote, thank heaven, but in the last 100 years, only 491 women have been elected. There have been about, 4,503 men in that time. So now we're calling for seats. So our slogan is Seats for Women. At the last election, only 12 extra women were elected. At that rate, it's going to take 50 years to get gender balance. I'll be dead, and most of the audience we had this morning will be old. So this really matters. We need to take action. And it is possible. Over 40 countries have better gender balance than we do. And many of the parliamentary committees look just like this. You know, there's only one woman around the table making decisions about health, the environment. So although this is a cartoon, it's not an unrealistic situation in many of our parliamentary committees, as Gillan will vouch for, yes? So we want 116 more women elected. And we're out to recruit them now with our Ask Her to Stand campaign, which my team basically said we've got to take forward. I was basically on the point of giving up with this campaign because my husband died early in 2017, just after Women's March London. And I put the whole thing on the back burner because I just didn't have the energy and, frankly, many other priorities. I've got 4 beautiful children and I had to focus on them. In the autumn of that year, I met with my team and I said, you know, I can't be bothered anymore. And they said, no, Frances, we really need to go forward with the Ask Her to Stand campaign. We had launched it in December 2016, and as I say, it was sort of on the back burner. And they said, let's copy Hillary Clinton. She should run. And actually, I have to say, it was 2 men, Daushan one of them, who worked really hard on the website to redesign it completely. And it's really focused now on Ask Her to Stand and Sign Up to Stand. So please join us. Take a look at that. So that is what we're doing. And people say to me, well, I don't want to be an MP. Many women say that to me, and that's okay because we only need 1 in 100,000 women to be at Westminster to have gender balance. And we need your help to find them. So it doesn't matter if you don't want to be, but ask someone who might want to be. It's a kind of, you know, a ripple effect. And we're campaigning on behalf of the 32 million women with a diverse majority. And there was an issue about trans. Of course, we're campaigning on behalf of trans women too. And some women face multiple hurdles, and we want to help them on the way. And some women need twice as much help in order to get into that place. Why does it matter? And I like to use the 4 R's because it sort of helps me remember. It's about representation, resources, responsibility, and respect. Take tax on tampons. When President Obama was asked, why is there tax on tampons? He said, well, because men were making the laws when those taxes were passed. And that is the tip of the iceberg. Equal pay legislation. It was Barbara Castle that had to fight really hard to get equal pay legislation. And that was a really tough battle at the time. More recently, Sarah Champion had to fight pretty hard to make pay public. So we now know whether men and women are paid the same or differently. And so it is women that are fighting for women at Westminster. Representation shapes policy, that's the point. I'm an antenatal teacher, I want better maternity services. And when I looked at the makeup of Parliament, I kind of realised that most people in power had never been pregnant or given birth. So it wasn't something that they really understood. And that's kind of what sort of motivated me to get this campaign started. That and another story, my daughter, aged 8, came running out of school one day and said, "Mum, I've been elected to school council." I said, "That's great. Are you representing the class?" And she said, "No, not just me. Of course, there's a boy on school council too." And I said, "Oh, that's great. So it's a boy and a girl." And she said, "Yes, because they don't understand the difference between or whether girls should wear trousers or skirts. And we don't understand how the boys' toilets get so dirty." So our experiences are different. And I thought, ka-ching, ka-ching. Well, it should be just like that in Parliament. So the point really is that men can represent women and women can represent men, but the evidence seems to suggest that men represent women better when there are more women in the room. And I expect women would represent men better the more men that were in the room, but we haven't got that problem. But fundamentally, it's about the institution. It's not really about the individual. We just need more women in this institution. It's meant to be representative. Then it comes to resources. Obviously, women are half the talent, we're half the experience, we're half the university graduates, we're 60% of lawyers. So we want Parliament to draw upon the widest possible pool of talent, and women are half the talent. So as Helen wrote on the petition, apart from the obvious injustice, we're in no position to underutilise so much talent. You can put your own comments on the petition. And responsibility. We want women to be fully involved in all the major decision-making, not just women's issues, but the environment, the economy, defence spending, healthcare. We should be fully involved in all the major decisions. And it's about respect. Obviously, Parliament should be showing respect for women and their opinions. They should be leading the way when it comes to gender equality and showing all the other organisations how to do it. This, by the way, the SNP, and of course their leader, Nicola Sturgeon, said gender balance should be at the heart of government, and they've been incredibly supportive and helpful with this whole campaign. That's all the SNP MPs outside Parliament showing support for the cause. So this is Professor Nari Woods. We know that when women are in Parliament, it builds more resilient, responsive, better informed institutions. So obviously we want the best Parliament in the world. And this is Professor Bogdanor, who was actually David Cameron's personal tutor. And he says, the life experience of women is bound to be different to that of men, not superior or inferior, but different, and that needs to be represented in Parliament. Well, thank you, Professor Vernon Bogdanor. As I said, men are behind this campaign as well, and the first MP in our T-shirt was a man, which shows that even men at Westminster support this. It was Ben Bradshaw, MP for Exeter. And we've got men and women working together on this campaign, and indeed trans women and trans men. I mean, you know, it really doesn't matter about your sexuality. Everybody believes in equality. Well, we hope they do. We now have 52,800 signatures on the petition, but frankly, that's not enough. This has got to explode, otherwise it really doesn't seem to matter to people. And you can add all your own comments. In Parliament this year, on the 7th of February, which was 100 years after women, or the act that allowed women to vote was passed that was passed in sort of 1918. So on the 7th of February 2018, all the front bench on the Labour Party, that's Jeremy Corbyn wearing our little pin. And on the opposite benches as well, that's Theresa May. She was wearing ribbons, the suffragette ribbons, and all the other people sitting on the front bench there were wearing the 50-50 pin. So they're all saying the right thing. They're all saying this is what they want, but we need action. We need deeds, not words. So we need to keep putting pressure on the parties. We need to keep putting pressure on the system. We need to keep putting pressure on the organisation to change and welcome women. So they all say the right thing, but now we want them to take action. And we're taking the little action that we can, which is we've set up this ambassador program. So we've got ambassadors throughout the country now, and we're sharing this presentation with them so that you can spread the word and tell other people about the campaign. So that's us in schools, that's us marching. And then, as I say, we launched the Ask Her to Stand campaign in 2016 with the support of Jess Phillips and Justine Greening, Nikki Morgan, Sarah Champion. It's a real cross-party endeavour. And then I met Rosie Duffield in 2015. I was doing a bit of a presentation at Canterbury University, and she called and asked me if I'd meet for a coffee, and I said, definitely. And she said she seemed to be really knowledgeable about politics. So I said, you should stand. She said, well, Labour won't choose a woman. And anyway, this is a Conservative constituency, and I'm Labour. I said, you never know till you have a go. Well, then in 2017, she was elected. She overturned a sort of Tory majority of over 100 years. And she is now a major advocate for us at Westminster, which is fantastic. So this is actually an occasion where we're all in Parliament, and you can see, again, it's very cross-party. You probably don't know all the MPs, but Rosie Duffield's in the middle. So she's been fantastically helpful in promoting the campaign at Westminster. And this is a Tory MP called Helen Grant, and she's on our Get Inspired page. So you must have a look at our Get Inspired page. It's fantastic to have the women in Parliament supporting the campaign. And what I've noticed is that it's really useful for them. They feel more empowered when they know that women out there really care about the fact that they're in there. I don't know if that's sort of true. So we're called the 21st Century Suffragettes, and this was us having some fun in Parliament a while ago. And that kind of wraps up the whole campaign, our sort of campaign PowerPoint. As I say, I'd love to share this with any of you that might be interested in using it. And now, really, I just want to hand over to our panel here. We've got Elaine Bagshaw, who has sort of stood for the Lib Dems. We've got Gillian, who has stood for the Conservatives and won a seat. And I'm so sorry, but you've just stood in. So
I've been dragged in off the street. My name's Stella, and I stood for Labour in 2017.
So that is fantastic. So we've got a cross-party panel here, and I'd just like to hear from each of you, very, very short, said 2 or 3 sentences, really, why you stood, and then maybe we can get some questions from the audience. That would be amazing. Yeah, Elaine, do you want to stand?
We have to go to the lectern, apparently, for the
Podcasting.
Yeah. Which might make it the format slightly different in terms of back and forth.
Be fine. Fine. Well, hi. So my name's Elaine Bagshaw. I've stood for Parliament twice for the Lib Dems, and I was also our candidate for Tower Hamlets Mayor earlier this year, and also in the special election we had to have in 2015. So I was, after the disaster of the 2015 general election, the first person that had to stand for the Lib Dems, which has made the last 3 years of my life quite interesting. In terms of why you should stand, I think Sophie Walker made a really good point in the main session earlier about, you know, if you really think that the world is being well run by the middle class, mediocre white men that are running it at the moment, then fine. But I would guess that because you're in the room, you probably don't think that. There are so many things and so many decisions that are made that women's voices aren't heard in, and it drives all kinds of just bad decisions, terrible ways that institutions are run, and it's exactly the same as companies where you don't have diversity. People's voices aren't heard and that perspective isn't heard, and then that means that there's really bad outcomes for a lot of people involved. I also think people should stand because it's great fun, and most of my friends are people that I've met on the campaign trail, people that have spent many hours shoving pieces of paper with my face on 3 letterboxes, who are now some of my closest friends. I've still managed to influence change even though I didn't get elected. So when I was the mayoral candidate in 2015 in Tower Hamlets, there were a number of things on my manifesto that Labour's John Biggs, who got elected, then took and actually implemented. And people are like, well, you must be really angry because you get no credit. And I'm like, well, no, because actually stuff happened. And that's fine by me. We've had a pay equality assessment done in Tower Hamlets Council, which doesn't just cover gender, it colours ethnic minorities as well. And it's things like that actually, it's like, well, I didn't get elected, but I've actually made a difference to people. And that's a really great thing to be able to say. So yeah, I think those are my key ones. It's a really great thing to do. You can also actually, the one thing that I did want to say, if you're standing for things like Parliament, and when I stood for Mayor, it gives you a platform to influence change in your party, whichever one it is. So when I was the mayoral candidate earlier this year, I insisted on making sure there was gender parity in the council seats where we were running. So we went from, in 2014, I think about 10% of our candidates were women. It was 45% this time because I badgered everyone to make it a priority. And there was lots of phoning of people. We ran our own events, especially for women, to encourage them to stand. And lots of those women now have come to me and said, actually, I want to give running for Parliament a try. Like, how does that all work? So you can affect change in that way as well. So it's a really great platform and way to do things.
Thanks, Elaine.
Well, I saw myself in some of those photographs actually at the launch. I'm Gillan, Keegan, and I'm now the Member of Parliament for Chichester. I stood for election 3 times within 7 months, actually twice for a council, and then I was just in the right time at the right place. Actually, I'd done 1 unwinnable seat and then right time, right place. So why? First of all, because you've all got something to offer. I think Helen Grant's quote there is, you know, if she could do it, if I can do it, then you've got something to offer as well. So I think that's the most important thing. Women are very good at persuading themselves that other people have got more experience, they're better at this, they're better at that. So forget all of that, because you'll find in this world there'll be some people who'll be very good at self-promotion, and therefore you cannot afford to be self-doubting. So be confident, because you've got something to offer. You can influence policy. Now, I don't know whether it's just because I'm a new MP, because I'm a Conservative and, you know, the Conservatives are in government, because it's a hung Parliament, but definitely what you say, you can influence policy. Already you can see that, you know, possibly it's because it's a hung Parliament, but certainly you can influence and you can get stuff done. Style matters as well. I think more and more in the 21st century, the style of how we communicate matters. And I think women have some very natural gifts and assets on the whole to add to that. Tend to be quite good listeners, tend to be quite reasonable in our approach, tend to work together to get things done. The cross-party working is much more important than you will ever see portrayed in the media. Everything gets done cross-party. I mean, and Jess is gone, but Jess and I are even going to Tanzania together at the end of the month. So, you know, we're kind of, you know, we do a lot of stuff together because we care about very similar things. And then the thing I would say is I've had a very long business career, so this is my 2nd career, so that's how I've come to it. You know, I'm 50, I've worked 30 years in business. I started at 16 as an apprentice, so, you know, I've had a long business career, and I just wanted to do something different. I didn't wake up one day and think I wanted to change the world like the very inspirational Frances. I just thought, you know, where could I use my skills? What could I do that's different? And I've had some really, really cool jobs in my life and lived in very many exotic parts of the world. But this is the best job I've ever had. It is unbelievably rewarding. You have the constituency side where you do get to solve problems. I have surgeries. I have solved people's problems, and there's nothing more rewarding than knowing that you can actually help somebody. And people often say that you can't. I already have. I mean, really big things, like somebody who was locked in a prison for 4.5 years away from our country and with mental health issues, and now he's home with his mum and dad. He's in a mental health facility here, but his mum and dad can see him. Things like that. For 4.5 years, you know, nothing happens. You can make a difference, and I think that's why to stand. And you've all got something to offer. All of your experiences will be valuable in Parliament.
Hello everybody, my name is Lola McAvoy and I stood for the Conservative safe seat Penrith and the Border in the 2017 snap election. I guess I sort of, obviously given time, but genuinely think that you all know why you should stand. I think the presentation was brilliant, and I think it's because you want to. Like, I think you're already here because a little bit of you really wants to. And everybody knows the hundreds and hundreds of reasons why not to stand, okay? There are loads of reasons. The patriarchy, Twitter, your own personal relationships, hangovers. Like, there are millions of reasons why not to stand. But actually, if you've got that feeling inside you, that you've got that little bubbling energy that thinks, I think I might be able to do that. I think I might be able to do that job. I think I might be able to make that difference. I think I've got something to say. Then that's why you should stand, right? Now, genuinely, the other thing is, so my thing for this is just like, why not, right? But also, the reason why I want to stand and just give you a couple of like little bits of tips on this is just because I found it really hard to say, why me? So I knew why I could probably spend half an hour with all of you and have a one-to-one and a coffee and then tell you why you should stand. I find it really easy to big up other women. I find it really easy to find interesting things about other women, but I found it quite difficult to articulate why me, why should I stand, why should people vote for me? And the first thing that got me over the hurdle was the idea that by putting my hand up and speaking in a room where women aren't usually heard, that was taking a radical act. That was taking action. So that was the first, like, that was my gateway drug. So the first thing was, I thought, why shouldn't I ask a question? I will ask a question, I will be heard. So that's like the first bit of advice. Just start asking questions, start putting yourself forward, because it's a radical act to put yourself forward for anything, right, as a woman. But really, genuinely, write yourself a letter about why you should vote for you. Like, sit down and write it out. Like, why you, why your skills, but really, what is your story, okay? Because people will ask you over and over again. Men will ask you over and over again why they should vote for you. And that would be like my one bit of advice, is just get that story nailed down, like, so that you can, and start practicing it on people. Practice it on people that you sort of know, like maybe B-list friends, not your core. Your core will tear it apart, right? They will laugh at you, they will tear it apart, and they'll say, no, that doesn't sound like you. Like my brothers, the first bit of media I ever did, that was national media, my brothers rang me afterwards and they said, because I'd sort of text them and said, I think I'm going to be on, and then immediately regretted it. And they rang me, and I couldn't hear what they were saying, because they were laughing so much. And they said, who's Lola? Like that. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? And they said, you put this stupid voice on. Like, what were you doing? And I thought, oh, yeah, you really need that. But the point was, your core people will I wouldn't use them as a sounding board. Use your B-list friends, right? Who actually really like you, but you don't see that often and wouldn't like actually tear you down. So use your B-list friends, start testing the stories, whether it's your grandma, whether it's your great-grandma, whatever that bit of, like, someone's inspired you to be here today, whatever it is, whatever change you think you can give, you've all got something to offer, you all want to do it, like, that's why you should stand.
Yeah.
Thank you. Amazing speeches from all of you. Thank you. I've been really inspired. And Lola, I loved your point about there must be something in all of us, and why not? I guess one thing that puts me off is like the campaigning and just kind of the intrusion. You just touched on it then, like the intrusion in your life. You really have to dedicate a lot of time to it, and we all know what happens on Twitter. So I guess just your experiences of that. Is it as bad as it might seem from the outside, or is it doable?
Thank you. Great question.
I think you have to go into it with your eyes open, that like it's pretty grisly, but like you are inspiring other people by doing it, and that's like a great reason to do it. And you are going to be the change, right? So you go in and you don't take those things to heart, and you try and be a bit more resilient, and you will make a difference just by putting yourself forward. I think it's really important. Obviously, there are horrible things going on Twitter. We can't say that they're not. I think in terms of like the campaigning side of things, I think genuinely, I know this is going to sound cheeseball, right? But genuinely, the positive support that I got from members of the public was so overwhelming that the few people who were horrible just looked really sad, and I pitied them genuinely. Like, that was my experience. I had people coming up to me in the street just because I had a rosette on, who'd never met me, just saying, are you our Labour person? Thank you so much for being here. And it was like, and that will be the same for everybody. Okay. Like, it was unbelievable. I was so overwhelmed by it. It was just a really wonderful and moving experience, and an honour to actually be able to stand and receive that much like support from random members of the public. And so I would say like that massively outdid any sort of like trolling. But that's not for everybody, so.
Thank you.
The reality is you have to put yourself through the experience and you'll know whether it's for you or not. So the woman who asked me to stand as part of this campaign, Baroness Anne Jenkins, she's actually in the Lords now, she stood in Glasgow or somewhere, I think, as a Conservative in the 80s, and after it decided she didn't want to do it. So it is important to put you through it. I did stand, and you do have, you know, you're going round and there's posters of you with, you know, graffiti on, and, you know, you're people are writing stuff on your Facebook page about, you know, in my case, you know, evil, conservative, you know, not a very thoughtless person, to put it in polite terms. And, you know, and I grew up in Liverpool and left school at 16 and you know, did everything from the bottom, and yet they suddenly now, because I'm conservative, think I'm some kind of brand something else, which is nonsense. And you've got to really go through that to decide and it's horrible, I think, but you do get tougher, and you'll only know at the other side whether you get to the point where, as you say, the vast majority of people are not that political. They're not actually. When you knock on the door, they're quite open to whoever it is, and they're just happy that someone's knocked on the door in many cases and asked their views. You will find, you know, in Twitter particularly, it is full of extremists, and, you know, they're basically keyboard warriors. I've got a database of some of them, and it's all the same people. They're like marking you. There's about 10 of you marking about 5 of us, kind of thing. And so once you get the game that they're up to, then it's easier to actually put it into perspective. But you have to go through it and decide whether that's what you want to spend the rest of your life doing, because campaigning is part, well, I mean, particularly now, 2015, 2017, you know, who knows? And then you've got councils. So, you know, it is a big part of the job.
In terms of the scrutiny part of it, I mean, so I've not run really in target seats, so it's not really come up, but it is more, there is just this culture of how women in politics are talked about, and I think that is something that you just have to take into account. But I would also say it's really important that more women stand just to start challenging that. So Tower Hamlets mayoral earlier this year, there were 3 women candidates, and it was the most there had ever been. And actually it was great because you could have those kind of conversations and debates. I think the first time I ran for Poplar and Limehouse, I was the only woman candidate for Parliament, and I was just a bit like, oh man, this is odd. Although now I work in technology and I'm constantly like, yeah, I'm the only woman here again. But it's just something that you have to factor in. Twitter, I just ignore, I mute people, and I have learned to just kind of say, you know, if you are sat at a computer at 2 o'clock in the morning writing abuse on my Facebook page, then actually that says a lot more about you than it does about me. And I'm not gonna take it to heart, and it's not gonna change that I'm a good person and I'm doing good things. And actually, you know, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, mate. Get something else to do with your life. Campaigning, yeah, it can take a lot out of you. I think the biggest thing that I learned is to try not to be superwoman, and don't try and do it all yourself. Be very clear with yourself and your team about how much you can do, not just around work, but like physically and emotionally, how much you can actually do. Knocking on doors and saying to people like, oh, I'm your candidate, is there anything I can help with? You know, there were points where I was like, I'm not coming and doing this tomorrow because I can't do it. I'm too tired. And getting that group of people around you to really help you do all of those things. And so I've been really lucky that I've had like really good teams, and I've had campaign managers that have all been women. Has been great as well. I would encourage you to find those other women that are like, oh, I think I want to try this, but I'm not sure, and kind of bandy together to try it out and see how it works.
Thanks very much. That reminds me of another quote from Hillary Clinton: to get the sexism out of politics, we've got to get more women into politics. So, you know, it's that's what we're sort of trying to do here. Any more questions? Yeah.
Thanks very much. Brilliant speeches, really, really inspiring. I think I can speak on behalf of everyone with that. It's also really nice to hear that you don't need any particular skills or any particular qualifications or anything like that to run. But is there anything that you do need going in? And that could be something similar, like, well, obviously you need to be a member of the party. You obviously need to live in your constituency. Is there anything, correct me, what do we need to know, basically, going on?
Thanks, that's another great question. You can go to our website and there's a Get Elected page that will tell you what you need to do, and you're right, absolutely, you do need to join a party. And if you go further down the page, you'll see party resources, which will give you links to all the parties, their manifestos and all this kind of thing, and the people in the parties. But anyway, I'm also going to hand over now to the panel so they can tell you what they think you need to do. Where did I start last time?
Yes, well, do you need to be a member of a party? You can run as an independent if you really want to.
True.
That's a bit expensive, but, you know, it's an option. You don't have to live in your constituency. I live in mine, but that's a kind of, you know, I live in London and I managed to get on the housing ladder through shared ownership, and I can't afford to move to Twickenham like some people have suggested I might want to further my career. So that I'm just kind of there, but you don't have to live in the constituency at all. And from a kind of voter point of view, I think some people find it important, but not everyone. Each party will have its own process, so again, if you sign up on the website, we can talk you through that. So I know for the Lib Dems, it's very much like a job application. There's a form that you have to fill in, and then there's an assessment day that we do that involves like an interview and some other little like team exercises, very much like any kind of graduate assessment centre you might go to, and then we can talk you through everything else. Other things for you to know, I'm trying to think now. In terms of skills for you to have, like, so I would say actually like communication skills are the most important. So actually I did something about this recently where people were saying about, you know, is there a job that really lends itself to politics really well? My career, I actually started out in contact centres, so on a phone, giving customer service to people, and I was like, that's actually probably the best grounding I could have had for now, doing phone canvassing, standing on people's doorsteps and trying to talk to them about things they possibly don't want to talk about, and selling yourself all the time and dealing with people that want to complain about you and yell at you and that kind of thing, was actually, that kind of thing was really helpful. So yeah, I think those would be my big things.
I think so. There are some things which you can get from the website, which is, you know, the party, etc. If there are any barriers, you can overcome all of them. So, for example, I mean, you're from the same neck of the woods as I am. I recognise the tones. I'm an MP. I could never be an MP for Knowsley, where I'm from. In fact, the safest Labour seat in the country is Knowsley. Although George and I, just so you know, people do work together, because I went to a comprehensive school there. So George and I are going back to a number of schools, and I'm taking him to a factory because it's a Conservative person who's the factory owner. But you know, you do work together. But I think if you're, first of all, you've got to choose a party, and sometimes, you know, people find that a bit tough actually. And then, you know, it doesn't really matter if it's not where you are locally, but it's a bit harder to get things like the council experience. So don't flog a dead horse. If I'm Conservative in Knowsley, there's no point me standing for Knowsley Council with 60 Labour councillors for decades, right? So that, you know, you have to figure out another way around it. But these kind of groups are the most important thing to come to. So the Conservative Party has one called Women to Win. The Labour Party has
Labour
one,
Women's
which is
Network.
Labour Women's Network, and the Lib Dems have one, which is
Lib Dem Women.
Lib Dem Women. So go and join the Women's Network, and then you'll find a whole load of people who want to help you. They'll have all been, you know, I didn't know anything about it, or even any MP at all. And the whole maze has been navigated by those women's groups and Ask Her to Stand. So just throw yourself into them, ask all the stupid questions you want. Don't sit there and think, I can't get there, because I used to sit there and think, at the first conference I went to, go to conference of the party as well, the first conference I went to, I sat there and thought, I could never do this, I could never be that. How do they know all this stuff? How can they speak so well? You know, all of that. You will just get there by practice, and the way they prepared us was by just practicing. We had every Monday night we'd meet, we'd practice answering questions, question time, we'd pause it, we'd practice answering questions with a glass of wine. It gets, it's quite good fun. So just practice, and you'll get better. You'll get your story, and you'll get your story in a way that you feel better about telling it. When you first tell it, it sounds crap, or it sounds like everyone else's, so high level, it's content free. But if you practice it and practice it with other people, you'll get it to a point where it will be really good, and you'll get confident. And all the things you don't know, you'll overcome once you've got that confidence.
I think so. In terms of skills, no, anyone can do it. You don't need any existing skills. You do probably need a massive, big dose of humility. So I think quite a lot of the time you can get taken down a peg or two. You got to be able to roll with the punches. Bit of resilience, bit of humility. But I think probably the thing that I found has been really useful is good sense of humour. Genuinely, you've got to be able to laugh at yourself. I mean, one of the situations that I went into this hustings. I was prepping for this hustings. I was thinking to myself, oh, it's okay because nobody's got the questions for the hustings. The hustings is the most terrifying bit. It's where you sit on a panel and random members of the public can ask you whatever they want, and you have to answer it on the hoof, and people can take chunks out of each other, right? So you can do that. And that's sort of what people want. They want to watch a bit of a bum fight. And so I was thinking to myself, okay, it's going to be absolutely fine because nobody's seen the questions. And I arrived at the hustings, and the guy who's my agent said, oh, Lola, did you get the email? And I said, what email? You're thinking, already my heart's going, what? And he said, did you get the email? I said, what email? And he said, oh, the email 2 days ago that they sent with all the questions on, and that all the other candidates were CC'd on. I said, oh, no, I didn't get that email, John. No, I didn't get it, babe. Did you get the email, John? Yeah, no, I did get it. I got it. Yeah, John got it. So John got the email. I wasn't on the email. And so seconds before, he handed me these questions, and they were all the questions you dread. I'm not going to go into detail, but it was everything, right? It was everything that you wouldn't want to have to answer on the hoof in front of a load of people that you didn't know. And then, to make it worse, my mum was there. And I was thinking, oh my god. And then, so I'm sat on the, it was actually on the altar. That's the other thing, good sense of humour, you've got to have it. I'm sat on the altar.
Usually sat on the altar.
Yeah.
I've never been to church so much.
So I'm sat on the altar, and the Green candidate stands up, and somebody asks, a question about, and he was a nice guy, and yeah, whatever. Somebody asked a question about Ofsted, what's your position on Ofsted? And my mum's a teacher, and the Green candidate said, well, we'd abolish Ofsted, and my mother clapped. Nobody else clapped. Just my own mother clapped. And I had to sit there on the stage and still remain still doing it. Somebody get rid of that woman. And still remain, composed and so that taught me that if I could do that, I could pretty much do anything. Resilience and a good sense of humour, and we laughed about it after a large glass of wine. But I would say, yeah, good sense of humour, a bit of humility. I think probably the other thing, somebody gave me a good tip, right? Network, definitely. Network all you can. Ask people for favours. You have to ask them. We don't ask people. So as women, less likely to just ask them. So say, actually, could you tell me how you got elected? Could you tell me who funded your campaign? Because people know sponsors, people know donors. It's all about relationships, so that's a good thing. But the other thing is a little pot of all the nice things people have ever said to you. Just keep it in here, and every time you're feeling really rubbish, just take a little sip out of that little pot, or take a little, and keep that as your own little resilience pot that's going to big you up when you're feeling a little bit low, because I think it can be lonely, and nobody told me that it was going to be lonely. And I really valued having other PPCs to ring and say what's going on, because some people, your friends and family, unless you're from a political family, your friends and family won't know really what it's like, and they'll all be super proud and super keen and tell you to change policy. That's what all my family said all the time. Oh my god, have you seen this latest thing? Yeah.
Like a social think tank.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I've seen this really great policy in The Guardian, so I think you should use it in your speech. I'm oh my goodness me. But so there's that. So people don't understand, and also genuinely, if anybody wants to ask me any questions, you can come and grab me afterwards. You can have my card, because I found it really a little bit isolating not having people in exactly the same position to ask. So spread the network, spread the love, basically.
I think we're almost meant to be wrapping up. Is that right? So is anyone really feeling like they've got a question they would like to ask? Or is, well, you know...
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How many of you are thinking now that you will stand?
Come on, that's it.
Okay,